Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Tuesday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We got some fantasy football and some pro wrestling to get to on the show. Plus, it is a UFC fight week, so we get ready for UFC 310, looking at the main event storylines that you should be focusing on going into that big fight. Thanks for joining us. We're presented by Sea of Dead. Check out seaofdead403.ca right now. There we got some great Stampede Wrestling stuff along with Run YYC, plus some pre-orders on some really cool stuff, including just some Sea of Dead merch as well. So check all of that out. Let's get into this show as we get ready for another week in the fantasy football world. Let's get into the fantasy football waiver wire.
Yeah.
All right, so the fantasy football season continues, and this one may be one of the more important waiver wires of the season so far. So let's jump right into it. We will start at the quarterback position. Derek Carr, I think, is worth a pickup here this week at 15% owned, facing the Giants, who kind of seem like they've quit on things. Derek Carr, again, losing another one of his options, but also losing a goal line running option, so maybe a few more passing touchdowns in his future. The waiver wire isn't great for quarterbacks just in general so far this season. Also, Bryce Young, 5% rostered. I think he's actually good. I think we are actually seeing now that he might actually be a good quarterback. This Eagles defense can be good, but you can throw on them a little bit at times. And so I think that there is going to be a chance that he comes up with a pretty big week this week. And so I'm intrigued to see what he is able to do. Also, I anticipate they will be losing by a lot. And so I think there's going to be a lot of garbage time for him to chuck the football around. And last one is Aiden O'Connell in the holy shit, I'm desperate category. Aiden O'Connell, 2% rostered, facing a Tampa Bay defense that you've been able to throw on all season long. He's not great, but it's not great for the waiver wire, and it's not a great waiver wire week, and he's not bad if you're desperate. At wide receiver, Adam Thielen. We're going to stack things up here with actually most of them in this. But Adam Thielen stacking that up with a Bryce Young at 32% rostered. Couple fantastic looks against Tampa Bay, 10 targets last week. He's going to be a primary pass catching option on, again, an offense that feels like they're going to be behind in this game. Also at wide receiver, it is Marquez Valdez-Scantling at 31% rostered. Saved by a touchdown last week, but it is 3 straight weeks with double-digit points, and now no Taysom Hill to take targets away from him for the rest of the season, so he kind of moves up again that target ranking, I guess, out in New Orleans. And the last one is Sterling Shepard, 5% rostered, back-to-back weeks with 7 targets. He has a pretty easy matchup against the Vegas Raiders this week and a pretty good schedule the rest of the way, so Sterling Shepard in some of the deeper leagues may not be a bad ad. At running back, this is the one. We have been talking for a few weeks about how running back, we haven't really had a whole lot of great options. This is it. Isaac Guerrero, 8% rostered. CMC, Jordan Mason, done for the season. He is the guy now in the Kyle Shanahan offense. Do I think there will be a couple of running backs we've never heard of come in? Sure. But I think that Guerrero, we kind of saw him get a few looks anyway on this team throughout the season in different injury situations. And so I think that he is now going to get at least a bit of an extended look. And I think we are at a point now in the season where this is fab dump for me. I think that this is probably going to be the best one that becomes available. But a couple other running backs to keep an eye on. Braylon Allen at 32% rostered. 7 touches this week. He may be getting more as the Jets are now out of contention and probably wanting to not run Breece Hall into the ground and keep him for next year. So I think Braylon Allen gets a bit of an extended look. And Kenny Gainwell in kind of that similar vein. 4% rostered. It should be a big win for the Eagles this week against the Panthers, and so I think he gets some garbage time, and I think that he, again, could benefit from the Eagles wanting to ease things up a little bit on Saquon Barkley, although they are pushing for the number 1 seed in the NFC. At tight end, Noah Fant, 18% rostered, 4+ targets in 4 straight games that he has played, and the tight end position sucks. Okonkwo, sorry. 5% rostered. He got a fluke touchdown a couple of weeks ago, but 6 targets last week, and now he is facing teams that are in the top 10 for most points allowed to the tight end for the rest of the season. So I think he is absolutely a viable option at the tight end position, not only for this season, or for this week, but now going into the fantasy playoffs. Again, if you're desperate. And our defense on the streaming side of things this week, we are looking at the New Orleans Saints, 29% owned, still a relatively strong defense. And now they're facing again the New York Giants, who feel like they have given up. So those are the fantasy football waiver wire pickups for the week. Let's move on now to the other fantasy football segment that we do here on Tuesdays. It is the dumpster darlings. It is the top performances from the least owned players, the unexpected performances from the week in the fantasy football world. Again, presented by Sea of Dead. These are the dumpster darlings here for the week. So we look at the biggest performances from the guys who were the least owned to show just how cruel the fantasy football world really can be here in 2024. At quarterback, 15% owned, it is Jameis Winston. 35.98 fantasy points. Yes, it was a lot of interceptions, but holy cow, was it a lot of fantasy points. Our wide receivers this week, 1% owned. Parker Washington. I'm pretty sure he plays for Jacksonville. He comes in at 21.3 fantasy points. Nick Westbrook-Akine, 17% rostered, 19.6 fantasy points. Our running back this week, 0% owned. 15.4 fantasy points. That would be Chris Rodriguez. Also, 17% owned for Ray Davis, and he is at 13.2 fantasy points. Austin Hooper is our tight end, 1% rostered at 12.2 fantasy points. And in our flex spot, it is Marvin Mims. A 93-yard touchdown will help, but 2% rostered, 18.4 fantasy points. So before we get to the kicker, you look at that, and again, 17% owned is the best that we have on this. Our kicker, 1% owned, is Chad Ryland, 1% owned, 17 fantasy points. And our defense, Seattle, rostered in 22% of leagues, 14 fantasy points. So our dumpster darling team this week, 167.08 fantasy points. Again, the fantasy football world, very cruel. Okay, it is fight week in the Ultimate Fighting Championship as UFC 310 rounds out the pay-per-view schedule for the year for the company. And this is actually a really cool show. Let's explain it as we get ready for the big storylines this week in the UFC. It is UFC Fight Week, UFC 310, going down this weekend. In the main event, it's actually kind of neat what we're doing here, as we have Alexander Pantoja going up against Kai Asakura in the flyweight division championship bout. I think this is really cool, what we are about to see here this weekend. I think that you have it's a situation we don't get a whole lot. You have a breakout international star from another promotion. We haven't really had this in a really long time from the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and to get him in a title fight right away, it's really interesting. And look, it's not what it could have been if it was Pride or even Dream from back in the day, but it still is a bit of a geek out moment for hardcore MMA fans. This is the type of fight that can kind of liven up a division, and I think we can probably all agree that the division needs a bit of livening right now, as it was on life support for a really long time, and honestly probably isn't that far away from it still. But it's also been dominated by rematches, and even if Pantoja wins this fight, it feels like we get a rematch coming up next. So this is the fresh matchup that this division needs. And for Pantoja, it's an opportunity to kind of grab the spotlight. He is in a pay-per-view main event to close out the year. He has been on a great run, but still doesn't really get a whole lot of buzz. It feels like around Pantoja, more fighters are excited about, or more fight fans, are excited about what he could be, and not who he could be facing, and not necessarily what he could be. He just kind of goes out, does his thing, wins by decision, and everyone moves on. In his kind of title era of his career, it's 2 rematches and a fight against Steve Erceg, who is kind of felt like a mandatory challenger here for him. So now, coming out with a fresh opponent who's never fought even in the UFC before, this is a chance to really freshen things up for him and provide a bit of life for Pantoja, who's been on an amazing run, but still doesn't really feel like he has a whole lot of that buzz behind him. On the Asakura side, this is his moment. We haven't really seen the UFC hype train really get rolling yet, although you definitely get a sense that it is starting to here this week. 31 years old, 13 knockout wins on his resume, 2-time Rizin Bantamweight champion. This is obviously the biggest stage he has had in North America as he makes his UFC debut in a championship fight. And so this is a chance to turn into a star in one night. You can be 1-0 in the UFC with the flyweight championship around your waist. That it would be quite the accomplishment for him. And if he can do it in highlight reel fashion, which he is certainly capable of doing, then all of a sudden things start to pick up for this kid a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And you can have a real star on your hands. And that would be big because we haven't really seen Japanese MMA at this level in a little bit, right? Like every time a new promotion comes in and then goes away and then comes in and goes away, it just feels like a little bit of that luster is chipped away. And for fight fans like me, you can see a little bit of gray coming in on this thing a little bit. This was such a big part of the development of mixed martial arts was Japanese MMA with Pride back in the day, and the rivalry that existed. And honestly, there was a stretch where Pride was the undisputed champion of mixed martial arts. And then all of that goes away, and we'll probably have another Pride situation again, which for a number of reasons is actually a good thing, but for a number of reasons is a little bit unfortunate. And then you get other promotions that kind of come in, and right now, Asian MMA is Rizin, and it is One. And One has been spending a whole lot of money and is inexplicably still around. Rizin has just been kind of the little engine that could, plucking away. They got some pay-per-views, they put the fights up on YouTube, and you can watch some of the highlights. But this would be a chance, I think, for a region that hasn't really been paid attention to by North American fans in a real legitimate way for a while to be able to kind of get back on the map. So, no pressure on Asakura this weekend. Just, the entire fate of the sport in a country with a large amount of people just rests in your hands. No pressure. Co-main event, this is really fun. It features 2 undefeated prospects in a title eliminator. You have Shavkat Rakhmonov looking to stay hot and continue to solidify his status as the next one against Ian Machado Gary, who is also in that next one category. This definitely feels a little bit like John Jones against Ryan Bader back at UFC 126 when John Jones really burst onto the scene, because it feels like the winner gets a title shot here, and this is a gigantic opportunity for both of these fighters. For Rakhmonov, it is just another opportunity to show that he is that guy and just add another very impressive name to his resume as he works his way toward a title. For Gary, it feels like that momentum stalled for him a little bit, but it has worked back now, and a win here, and all of a sudden, that hype train back up to 1,000 behind this guy again, and he picks it up in a region that really needs some good headlines for MMA these days. So a very, very intriguing fight coming up in the welterweight division here at UFC 310. All right, that is the story from the UFC. Not the only combat sports thing going on, though, as we get ready for Saturday night's main event and coming off of what was a really fun pay-per-view or premium live event, in the WWE Survivor Series. The fallout was really good on the WWE side. Let's talk about it. So, WWE bouncing back from, or continuing their momentum, from Survivor Series, getting ready now for Saturday night's main event in 11 days with a banger of an episode of Monday Night Raw. The big story of this is the New Day turns heel on Big E. And I thought that segment was brilliant. It was fantastic. It was one beat away from being perfect. I'm going to start with the negative, which sucks. But the whole you could have done more to heal from a broken neck by now thing, that lost me for a stretch in there, because that's an absurd thing to say, you know. And we are trying to base this a little bit more realistically, right, around these guys. And so like they got it back on track with the "you never called us, you were never here, you went and did your desk job," all of that shit. They got it back on track. The part where it was like "why aren't you healed from a broken neck?" Like, that's absurd. But you've been here. You've been doing the commentary thing. You've been doing the desk thing. Now you want to come out and be our manager? That felt like a legitimate gripe, quite frankly, from the New Day. And to be able to turn that into a heel kind of faction, I do think it does kind of add some legitimacy to this. And one of the best things about the best heels is that you can kind of see their point. They're just going about it in a really shitty way. And so I think that is one of the things that adds this whole aspect to the New Day, the New Day, and gives it, I think, a bit of legitimacy. And I'm quite interested to see where it goes. But as this whole segment went on, you were trying to guess along with where's it going to go. Is it going to be a Kofi turn on Xavier? Like, are they going to try to swerve us with that? Is it going to be Xavier, as we thought all along, turning on Kofi? Is Big E going to be able to bring these guys back together? Like, I think a lot of people were hoping. Watched it with my wife. That's kind of the direction she thought it was going to go in. You didn't know, even as Kofi and Xavier turn and go face to face, you have this, what are they going to do here type of a moment. You were guessing until the last possible second where this was going to go. And it was art. It was so well done from these three performers. And now I'm really interested to see what is next. I think some people may be drawing to potentially a Obafemi coming in and being a big part of this group. And also, like, where does Big E go? Does he go and get a tag team to try to rival with these guys? Do we actually get him on television on a more consistent basis now? So I think there's a lot of questions around this. Other aspects of the show, I really enjoyed that first segment with Punk, Rollins, Sami Zayn, and Jey Uso. I think it sets up so many different rivalries that you can get to, and then another one added on top of it. And, like, honestly, everyone's rationale was believable. I thought it worked out really, really well. It set up the main event in a really fun way, and it just provides so many different storyline directions that they could go that it makes you excited for the next stretch here up to WrestleMania with all the different performers that are involved in this one. On the opposite end of that, Judgment Day Dissension, like, it's okay. This group has certainly felt like it has cooled off again. They tried to ramp it back up with them being badasses, and then they just kind of fade back. And now they ramp it up again, and they try to fade back. And now there's dissension again. It doesn't really click to me. Women's tag team match, it did feel a little rushed, and maybe not a picture perfect night, but the one thing that I really noticed is that this crowd is ready to get behind Io Sky. And if you guys have watched my content for any amount of time, you know that I will look at just any reason to believe that Io Sky should be a champion or something. But it does really feel like this crowd is getting behind Io and getting excited for her. And how could you not? She has a style that is so much fun to watch and is really easy to get behind. And so I think that there is a lot of momentum with this particular character right now. I don't think she wins the title at Saturday night's main event, because I think having that title in the Liv, Rhea, Raquel universe right now does kind of help things there. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Io comes away with a championship victory here on Saturday night's main event next weekend. Raquel also felt dominant. She gets the win. Her and Rhea, I think that you get to a pretty good level with that, and it's a nice little thing for Rhea to clear before she gets to, pardon the new wrestling term, the final boss with Liv Morgan. Gunther trolling Finn Balor was kind of fun with the Dom match. Doesn't really quiet the concern that he's turning babyface, but it was entertaining, and it should be a fun match at Saturday night's main event. The women's IC title tournament qualifying match with Chance Baszler and Dakota Kai, I think it shows what the IC title is kind of supposed to do right now. It highlights some talents that hadn't really been highlighted in all that productive of a way. But the one thing I will say, it can't just be, oh, they're the Intercontinental Champion now, and now they're the number one contender for the Intercontinental title, and now they're going to wrestle for a title. There needs to be more story put into these. We've tried that, right, with the women's tag team titles, where you just, well, these two teams are wrestling for a championship. What's the story? Championship. People don't care. So you have to A, make people care about the title, and then B, make people care about the characters. And I don't know if I listed those A and B in the correct order because it is all kind of tied together. Main event. I think it was a really, really good match, as you would expect, with Seth Rollins and Sami Zayn. I didn't love that we got back-to-back roll-up finishes in the R-Truth match and then the Pete Dunne one, but it worked given this. And then Drew comes back, which was not something that I was anticipating. Maybe it was out there. I've done a pretty good job of avoiding those kind of spoilers over the last little while. So I was genuinely surprised by this. My one concern is that there are so many storylines based on how have you helped the bloodline. You helped Roman Reigns. It's Kevin Owens and Cody. It's Seth Rollins and fucking everyone. And now it's probably going to be Drew McIntyre and Sami Zayn in that universe now, right? And so this has to feel a little bit different. And it'll probably be, well, you helped out CM Punk. And there goes that. But I feel like you do need to have a little bit more of a story than you helped the bloodline, because we've done that twice now. And you say it enough times, eventually you're going to go like, yeah, why are you doing this? Because Solo and them don't feel like that big of a deal, if we're being honest. So I think that you kind of need to go with a bit of a different note for that, even if it fits the Drew McIntyre character almost perfectly. But overall, this was a fun show. It feels like there are some big things coming out of it. It feels like there's a lot of different directions that you can go, not just for Saturday night's main event, but toward the Royal Rumble and now even to WrestleMania, I feel like, as well. And it was a good follow to what was a good show at Survivor Series. So again, the WWE momentum continues to build. That's going to do it for the show today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. If you want more of my sports takes, I'm on Sportsnet 960 The Fan, coming up here at 1 o'clock Mountain Time in Calgary. So by the time a lot of you are watching or listening to this, I will already be on there. Yeah, check that out. Make sure you follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein, basically everywhere. Twitch.tv/PrimetimePK. Thank you all so much for hanging out. Talk again tomorrow. I am out.